Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast, where each week we speak with brands, icons, innovators, and trailblazers within the fly fishing industry, exploring both the successes and failures they've encountered along the way to become who they are today. But first, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast or joined our email list, please do so by going to the flyfisherinsiderpodcast.com, or you can also find us on Instagram at flyfisherinsiderpodcast. Now let's begin. Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Today our guest is Bruce Chard. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me, man. This is great.
Yeah, no worries. Super excited you're here. Legend, a long-time seasoned fly fisher within the industry in the world. I'm sure you got a ton of good stories that you're going to tell with us. But before you get into the current stuff, bring us back to the humble beginnings of when you got into fly fishing and what that was all about for you.
Sure. Well, I was 16 in high school, and I had to do an English project, and I chose to write satire about fly fishing versus bass fishing, where most of my buddies in high school, when they'd go bass fishing or just fishing, really, they would bring their 5-gallon bucket of beer and sit on it with their worms and go fishing, and versus all the extra work and dedication that I put into trying to learn about fly fishing and looking under all the rocks for all the different kinds of bugs and just learn as much as you can about it. It's total opposite. So I actually got an A and did really well in that class, and it spurred me to look more and more into fly fishing. And once I graduated from high school, when I was 18, I absolutely fell in love with the saltwater fly fishing side of things, and ended up literally 3 months after I got my first saltwater fly rod, went to the Florida Keys, and then started traveling back and forth from where I grew up on the west coast of Florida in Venice, Florida, just north of Boca Grande and south of Tampa area. I would drive down every weekend to the Keys, and I finally got a little apartment down there, and I said, I'm going to move down here and be a guide, and nobody's stopping me. And I just fell in love with it. I practically went to sleep every night with my fly rod. I just loved it. I cast all night in the street at night, and I went fishing as much as I could during the day, and went to the Keys and loved it so much down there. I just knew that was going to be my destiny and what I wanted to do in life. So my dad saw it in my eyes and knew that I wasn't going to college, and just gave me $5,000 for a little flats boat. So I had my first little skiff when I was 18 too, and drug it down to the Keys, and I never got off the skiff either. So I worked 3 days a week for about 6 months when I first got to the Keys, and fished every other second of the day, and then got a position to work at a local fly shop in Marathon in the Florida Keys. And I started working there, where I got a chance to meet all the local guides down there at the time. And believe it or not, I moved to the Keys thinking that, like, every guide in the Keys is the most amazing fly fisherman there is. And when I got there in 1992, that was actually not the case. Most of the guys were mostly bait fishermen. Spin guys throwing shrimp, which is great, right? It's a great way to fish as well. But their overall knowledge of fly was very little. And I found that a lot of the old veteran guides in the Keys at the time were coming into the shop and talking fly stuff with me, because I'd be out there casting on the dock all the time in front of the fly shop. And they would come in and buy some fly time materials and get to know me. And they'd come in and start asking me questions, the little punk at the fly shop. So it was really cool. And I worked with a lot of them back then, but a low percentage of the guides were diehard fly guys. And since then, I think that has completely flip-flopped around. Most of the guys are all diehard fly guys now. So it's been a fun journey, and I love living and guiding the Keys, and I've made a great career of it, and I'm really excited. And every day I still get up every day, 365, 24/7. I'm constantly thinking and breathing fly fishing, whether I'm in the skiff or not. So it's been a great career, and I love it.
Awesome, Bruce. You know, it's funny, just hearing that story, and just like I just picture you like this young kid, and the old timers just coming up to you asking you for advice and stuff. And it must have been different times back then, because I guess you really kind of, I don't want to say you pioneered, but you must have been like definitely a trailblazer for like weeding fly in southern Florida, right? If you say most guys were using bait and stuff like that, what was that like?
Well, I think now that I can look back, I noticed too that a lot of the anglers and customers that came down, that same percentage were mostly non-fly fishing anglers. So, of course, Rick Ruoff and Steve Huff and Harry Spear and all the really great fly fishing guides were in the Keys and kicking butt, and they were unbelievable, and they still are great fly fishing guides and icons in the industry. But as far as the percentage goes, they were very few. Out of all the flats guides there, I bet they only made up 10 or 15% of all the guides there. Mm-hmm. And all the rest were basically fly fishing. So they didn't even have a fly fishing for permit tournament then. Matter of fact, I was actually, it was my idea at the fly shop in Marathon I go, why are we having all these great bonefish tournaments and great tarpon tournaments, but nobody has a permit tournament? So we actually had the first 2 permit tournaments before the Del Brown was created and before the March Merkin was created back in the mid-90s. And it was not strictly a fly fishing tournament. We had a fly fishing division and a regular spin fishing division. And it was great. We had, I don't know, 7 or 10 boats each year. It wasn't a big deal. But then they opened up the Del Brown, and that started really kicking things off. But back then, there really wasn't that many people fly fishing. And I think along with me progressing in the sport as well, the timing was just right, where not only were the guides kind of forced to learn more about fly because there were more fly anglers starting to come and evolve, but there were also more guides that were showing up that were strictly fly fishing guides. And over time, that has rotated over. And now we have almost everybody that I know of that comes to the Keys, very high percentage, to flats fish, it's got fly rods with them. And where that was not the case back in the early 90s. And it is now. And so those guys those older guys had to make a transition. Like, they all knew where their fish were in the Keys, of course. And they were able to take people there, but they really weren't able to instruct them much. And with all the guys coming in and talking to me and making friends with me, mostly because I could book them with charters that came through the fly shop, not only they got to see me tie flies and spend time with me and go cast on the dock and hang out. So they learned a lot about how to cast, because a lot of the guys couldn't cast very good because they simply didn't do it much. But now they knew that they had to learn more because the people were coming more and more with fly rods in their hands versus spin rods, and they had to learn more. So they were forced into it. And a lot of those guys now are full-time fly fishing guys now. Like 80% of all the trips they take are full fly guys. And what happens is the fly angler, since it's so challenging and the odds of catching fish are considerably lower, nobody ever gets satisfied. So and the guys that love to buy the fly rods are guys that get really addicted into it, and they'll come back multiple times a year. So it's also a better clientele as far as creating relationships and friendships with those clients and anglers that will come back over and over and over again and trust you with information. And that's when I really learned, probably inadvertently, but I can look back now and see, that's when I really learned how valuable instruction was. So I worked really hard when I was 19 for my certificate, casting FFF casting certificate and instructional certificate. And I worked with Steve Rajeff a lot, and Tom White and Tony Weaver, the Loomis, Washington and Alaska at the time. And some with Tim Rajeff as well. And those guys became my friends and mentors, of course, and helped me to study to get my CI. And I really, really love that so much, the teaching value I saw with it. Both on the boat and at the fly shop, because I was guiding half the week when I wasn't working in the fly shop. So I got the best of both worlds there. And I then worked for my master's. And then by the time I was 23, I was able to get my master's. And at the time, there wasn't very many of those around. So I worked really hard for that. And to this day, all the people that I've helped mentor to get their CI, all of them look at me and say, man, you know what? What a difference it is to have this under your belt, just to know that you can add this added value to your day of fishing and know that you're actually teaching people. Because let's just face it, everybody's not a great teacher. Look at Wayne Gretzky, how unbelievable of a player he was. It was hard for him to coach. So he doesn't coach much anymore. Good everybody's analogy. A little different when it comes to it. Yeah. So teaching is definitely a skill and passion as well. And it's hard to find that in a lot of guides. Most guides, I would say, don't necessarily value that as much. And the few that do, I think they're pretty busy, and they stay booked regularly, which is great. But what's really cool is when I worked at the fly shop too, I got to meet all the reps in the industry. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, I would take them fishing, and then you create relationships with them. And then I would learn how to go to the fly fishing shows. And then I meet all the different contacts throughout all the shows that I go through. And I really learned at a young age that relationships are absolutely everything. And being able to be really personable with my clients and having great friendships and relationships with everybody in the industry that I met over the years allowed me to put even more value into teaching. And that led me to start working with a friend of mine his name Jake Jordan, who started doing some bone fishing schools in the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. So he would take me over as an additional instructor. And I had a great time working with all the anglers at the schools there in the Bahamas. We used to do it at Peace and Plenty Bonefish Lodge with Bob Hyde. And I had a great time with everyone. Steve Rajeff would come, or Tim Rajeff would come too as another guest instructor as well. So here I am, young, under 24 years old, instructing in the Bahamas with some of the greatest in the industry. And it was just really an amazing experience and that I'll never forget. And
so Bruce,
I started having a lot of people want to do it themselves.
So Bruce, go ahead, what? Yeah. So let's dig in on that a bit more, because I think the value is there to highlight is like, when did it become real that like, hey, you're amongst all these great anglers, you're at the shows, you're hanging out, you've kind of transitioned, into the teaching aspect. You've got your FF, your CI, all that sort of stuff. You got all these certificates, you're casting, you're like, you're at that level, you're like at the next level within your career, and you're so young. Like, take us to that moment, or walk us through that moment of how you felt and like what was going on and what was going through your mind and everything like that is the importance to highlight.
Sure. I can honestly look back and think now that I'm not sure if I knew the difference. I was so passionate and I loved everything that I did about just being a part of the industry, guiding, instructing where I live, traveling around the world to do this, that I was so full of excitement that, working really hard for 5 years to prep myself for the master's exam. All that stuff I did it because I loved it. It didn't even seem like work at all. And I didn't even think of it as being work. And at the time I was so young, I knew and had the utmost respect for all these great icons in the industry. And I just felt so special to be able to meet them and hang out with them. It was amazing. But I still thought of them as my friends, and I really didn't think anything of it. It was just like, I was just in another world and really, really happy every day to do what I was doing. And then I started working with those guys directly with manufacturing things. We're testing rods and testing products and doing stuff and working at the booths with them at the fishing shows and creating that part of the relationship as well was all coming together. It was amazing. And then I met a guy named Jim Keeney, who is one of the greatest guys on earth. He's just super, super nice, unbelievable friend. And he really opened things up for me in many ways. One, he would come down and spend a lot of time with me in the Keys, and we went tarpon fishing quite a bit. And we did a lot of nighttime tarpon fishing. And we became really good friends. And he had, at the time, a professional series fly lines where I think Gary LaFontaine had a line, Lefty Cray, Flip Pallet, Dave Whitlock, Kelly Gallup, Pat Ellers. All these guys had a professional series designed fly line with Jimmy and his company. And I asked him one day, I said, hey man, how come you don't have a permit line? Like, every time I go permit fishing, we're doing two of the major things that make it really difficult to cast and fish effectively. One, we're throwing a heavier fly, right? So the heavier fly is the more challenging it is to cast. And then on top of it, we're throwing a longer leader. And we're doing them both at the same time. So it's harder to get that longer leader to lay out straight, which is really vital in your saltwater fishing. You got to get all that slack out, come tight to that fly, and know exactly where it is in conjunction to the fish at all times. You can't do that if you have slack in your system. So our anglers in the salt have to be tight to that fly right away in your primary presentation in order to have a chance. And it was hard to do that with a longer leader, especially when you put a heavier permit crab on there. So we're doing both at the same time. So every time I get an angler on the boat and we start permit fishing, I'd have to cut front tapers off fly lines and redo leaders and redo the whole deal to get everything dialed in to the point where their system would work as best as possible with the conditions that we have and their ability. And that led me to ask Jimmy about, hey, how come you don't have a permit fly line? Like, everybody's got bonefish tapers, everybody's got tarpon tapers, but like everybody's throwing at permit too. You know, permit is everywhere where tarpon and bonefish are. Like, hello. And he goes, well, that's a great idea. Why don't you design one and we'll do it? And I'm like, say what? So I spent another 6 months totally trying to fact check and make sure everything I'm talking about was legit, and putting things into my own mind where I'm really believing 100% in what I'm doing and why. And I came up with the design of the line, and Jimmy put it out there as a professional series line. And at the time, I don't think anybody even know who I was or anything. I was doing, paid presentations and speaking engagements at fly fishing shows around the country at the time, but still everything was just kind of just getting going.
How old were you? How old were you, Bruce?
This all happened 23 to 25 years old.
Holy crap.
That was the time frame where everything was. But on the other hand, too, the industry was really rocking it at that time as well. Like, all the manufacturers were doing really well. They're always coming out with new products. They had lots of credit lines and lots of extra cash flow to be able to put into R&D and do different things. So the whole industry was growing big time. And I was stuck in the middle of it, and I was just young and dumb fly fishing guide and doing it because I just love it. And I'm so passionate about it that I didn't even know a world without living the way I was living. So it was just really cool. So every day I had my guiding job for sure. But once I got off the skiff, it was a whole nother level of work, almost nightly, emailing and phone calls and learning this and learning that. And applying that to even my daily guiding routine was pretty awesome. But the fly line design came in to be a really, really, really big deal because creating lots of exposure for myself, get my name out there, because the product actually worked. It wasn't like a company pays you to put your name on their product because you have a track record already and they want to utilize your name for marketing benefits, and they put your name on product that's not necessarily the best thing. You're just doing it for a check. That's not the case here. This is the complete opposite. I mean, nobody knew me from anything, and I had no reason to do it other than I thought we needed a line that would be beneficial to helping us get that longer leader and the heavier fly way out straight in the strong wind. And so totally opposite reasons. And Jimmy believed in what I was doing and the taper design and why it worked, because he was there with me half the time on the skiff. I mean, he would fish with me almost 30 days a year for about 4 or 5 years. So we did a lot of time on the boat together. And when the taper came out, after we tested it, of course, a bunch and finalized the taper and it came out on the market, we really didn't do anything. And the word spread like crazy because people were using the line and it actually worked. And it helped them a lot to be able to get that line leader fly to lay out straight. And not only on their presentation, but while they're false casting. So I learned a ton about how the taper design on the fly lines makes such a big difference to transfer energy smoothly. You pay $100 for that fly line or $150 for the fly line. You're paying for that beautiful machine taper that helps to transfer and contain that energy smoothly all the way to the end of the fly line. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a leader system that helps and works with that front taper and the design of the fly line, you might as well not even have the fly line either. Yeah. The whole system needs to work together. And when it's all together, it is an amazing thing, and it can make a big difference. And if you have a hinging effect because of big diameter differences in your leader connection to your fly line, or minus soft mono versus hard mono, on however you construct your leader doesn't taper as much, and you got the 60-20-20 rule going, that a lot of times doesn't work as well as far as getting your line, leader, and fly to lay out straight. So when you're false casting, if that leader and fly doesn't lay out straight when you're false casting, then you have slack in your system there, and you're starting out on the wrong foot right away. You haven't even made your presentation yet. So I learned that not only did your whole system affect how your line, leader, and fly will lay out straight on your presentation cast, I've then learned how important it was on just basic false casting and forming tight loops. It was hard. Guys were having a hard time forming tight loops because the way that the systems were back then, by a pre-tapered leader or whatever, they're soft mono and they were tapered incorrectly to not rotate over and not stiff enough to hold the big flies. And we were hindering our ability to make good casts. So then I started working hard on leader designs and how to put all that together along with the fly line design, and just came up with a system that to this day, I still get tons of emails constantly from people. They just thanking me. They love the product, and it just worked. And I didn't know any better other than what I knew every day on the boat. You know, George comes on the boat. He's from Colorado. He's got his setup here. Let's cast this. Well, this isn't working too good. Try this one, and immediately cast better and likes it better, right? Mm-hmm. So then I start making transformations to his setup. And I mean, I did this every day for years and years and years. And until I finally made the product where, hey man, this is the real deal. This is the way it works. And about 5 years ago, when I had the opportunity to work with Tim Rajeff and Airflow and design the tropical punchline, within the first year, the Chard lines outsold all of the saltwater airflow lines combined, and continued to do that for the whole 5 years I was with them. It's pretty amazing. So, and we didn't even do any advertising. Like we didn't have to do anything at all. Yeah. And it was the fly shop getting positive feedback, and the owners of the fly shop would go fishing with the product as well. The reps loved it. I mean, the whole industry really embraced it, but not because of me or my name or anything other than the fact that it just worked really good. It was a great product, and it designed really well, and it worked great. So, along with all that, it's been a great ride for sure, and I'm still at it.
Well, you are. You're definitely plugging away, man. You're always grinding for sure. I know when we talked off air, like you were telling me how many guide days you do and all your other obligations. It's just crazy the amount of stuff that you got going on. In addition, I know with your line design and stuff like that, I know the permit fisheries, it can be considered a harder fishery, a harder targeted species to go after. Like how important, like do you think guys with the using the improper leader system and whatnot are missing out on fish just due to that, or not having, like in the false cast, again, not having your line straightened out? Like, do you think there's a percentage of that plays a role in missed opportunities?
Oh my gosh, it's huge. Yeah. Percentages is what it's all about, right? And almost everything in life. So the permit are definitely harder fish to catch than anything else. And one reason for that is that they're very spooky. And since they're really spooky, you probably have to cast it a little farther. And on top of that, when they're feeding in the shallows, a lot of times they're looking down. So if you don't get the fly right in front of them, they won't see the fly. So not only do you have to make a far distance cast, you also have to make a far distance cast accurately. And you have to do that consistently. And the only way to do that is if you are, really good at casting. And then you throw in strong winds or light winds and different situations where you have to make adjustments to your cast to get the fly to lay out and not spook the fish when you make your presentation, or when you're standing up really high in the boat, and so they don't see it, depending on the light angle and the wind angle and how shallow the fish is and how clear the water is and how much the water is moving or not. I mean, all these things are factors that make any fish more spooky, but especially permit. And I think it just boils down when you fish for a permit that's feeding and you do everything right and the fly rides correctly, I think you're going to have a pretty good chance of catching that permit. They're not that hard when things come together. But a lot of times it's hard to have all the things come together and then the angler make a good cast. It really does come down to the fact that can the angler make the presentation or not? And then you start breaking presentation percentages down from there as far as, well, how many times can the angler actually make this cast work and with this setup versus that setup? And those percentages right there can make the difference. So yeah, definitely. Usually when you become a serious permit angler, though, you have agreed mentally in your own outlook on the sport to take this to another level. So a lot of guys, I get a lot of questions about lines and leaders because I think not because they know a lot and they want to learn more, it's because they're frustrated. And they are trying to figure out why, and they're wondering if it has to do with the fly line setup versus the rod they have or the leader system they have or what. And some of it could have to do with their casting ability, of course, but on the other hand, I've seen guys that on the boat that are having a really hard time casting, and literally I will make adjustments to their leader, maybe put a whole new leader on, and make adjustments to their fly line, like cut half or all their front taper off and reduce the connections and stuff like this on the leader and put a different tapered leader on. And immediately the next false cast they make, you could just see it in their face. You're like, oh my gosh, what a difference. And the guy's casting 20 feet farther. So having everything, your whole system dialed in is huge, along with the fact that you need to be able to make the adjustments that you need as a caster to adjust to the different boat angles and fish angles and fish movement and wind and direction and all the other things that will have split second situational awareness decisions that you have to make as an angler. And all that has to come with experience. So if you think about it, all the guys that are in the salt right now that are known as big time icons, the Billy Pate, the Sandy Moretz, the Andy Mills, these guys have spent a ton of time on the water, like exuberant amounts of time on the water. And that has allowed them to combine that time experience with their advanced athletics skills, which this is a sport, athletic sport. I mean, some guys got it. Some guys have a hard time with it. It's all good. But these guys are really good because they spent so much time. They have tons of experience, and they have the athletic ability to put it all together. And on top of all that, they're passionate beyond belief about the sport as well. So when you combine all of that, it's really hard to not be successful. But it's really hard for most anglers to be able to fish 200 days a year and not have to go to work.
Yeah, I agree with
that. Yeah, so it's really hard to gain experience to become a really quality permit angler if you don't have the opportunity to fish a lot. But the guys that do are successful because they're able to, put their experience together over time, along with their abilities that they've learned and be able to make it happen. Plus, if you just do anything more, you're going to put yourself in the position to get yourself in the right spot at the right time more often, and you're going to be able to catch more fish. It's just about anything. Like you do more of anything, you're going to get more out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's that the what do they say, the 10,000 hour rule or something like that? 10,000 hours and you become a pro, right? Definitely one of the coolest things that you were doing, and when you were talking about your leader line setup, is you were educating me personally as a I hate like a non-permit, not by choice, as someone that's never caught a permit, but you were educating me in that. And I know you do your education and you guys, you do your teaching. You mentioned earlier about your bonefish school. You've been doing that now for quite some time. I know you're passionate about teaching people, how to catch bonefish and whatnot. Tell us a bit about that and how that originated, what it started, what the focus is, and what you guys are hoping to obtain from that.
Sure. Well, I saw such value with my anglers daily on the boat when I was guiding that I started asking them if they wanted to go to the Bahamas with me. And especially the anglers that had a hard time casting, because it was obvious they needed more time and more instruction. The only way to do that was to create a learning experience for them versus a fishing experience with some learning involved. This was going to be a learning experience with some fishing involved. And the one thing that I really thought about was, man, the Florida Keys is great. I guide here. I'm familiar with what the fishery is. And it's a really hard fishery. Doesn't mean you can't catch fish. And it doesn't mean it can't be really, really good. But overall, if it's very non-forgiving. So if you don't do everything right in the Keys, you probably will have a hard time actually catching a fish. And on top of that, you don't get as many opportunities. Well, in the Bahamas, with arguably some of the best bone fishing in the world, the flats are unbelievable. The water is unbelievable. The fishing is unbelievable. So let's combine that with endless opportunities. An angler in the Bahamas for 4 to 5 days of fishing is going to get more shots and opportunities to cast the fish, to see the fish in the different wind angles and light angles and everything on the different colored flats, what they look like when they're swimming, when they're tailing, when they're not. All this stuff, they're going to gain more experience in 4 to 5 days there than they would in 4 or 5 years coming to the Keys.
Cool.
So they're going to be able to gain a ton of experience quickly, along with being focused on your mindset when you come. Like, listen, man, this is not how many bonefish do you catch for your $5, or how many bonefish you can load up in your 5-gallon bucket and take home with you every day. This isn't about that. This is about learning as much as you can and trying to retain as much as you can and apply everything that you've learned as much as you can as soon as you can. And the only way to do all that is to put yourself in one of the best fisheries there are in the world, where you get lots of opportunities. And the fish are very cooperative and opportunistic feeders. So bone fishing, if you do everything right, no matter where you go, bonefish are generally very opportunistic. They'll come over, and most of the time, if, like I said, flies riding right, you do everything right, you're going to get a bite, or at least a good positive reaction. If you don't, and you hit them on the head, some places they're going to spook and run away. But a lot of times, like in the Bahamas, you can actually screw up accidentally or make a mistake. It's okay. Bonk them in the head, and they turn around and eat the fly and take off. So they give you a little love. It's not all the time so hard all the time. So it's really a great place to offer a school. So when I put all this together, I said, you know what? I love what my buddy Jake is doing here in the Bahamas and Great Exuma here with Bob Hyde at the Bone Fishing Lodges here. I'm gonna try to do one on my own for my own guys, and it became really popular. And I started moving to South Andros and working with Andrew Bennett and Deniki Lodge, which used to be a very popular spot there called Andros South. And that's where I introduced Luce Cahill to the Bonefish School down there too with Andrew Bennett. And really, I was doing 6 or 7 schools a year down there at Deniki. It got really popular. We started talking a lot about it on their popular blog.
Yeah.
And really created a lot of ground down there. And since then, it's expanded to the Blackfly Lodge in Abaco. I'm working with Clint and June there and the managers. And there at Blackfly, we've done many general schools, bonefish schools, and we've started a women's bonefish school there, and where we do a lot of instruction with Sarah Gardner, who's an unbelievable female instructor and captain from the East Coast. Super great people. Her husband Brian comes as well. It's a great deal there at Blackfly, and also I do a lot of hosted in bone fishing schools still at Oliver White's place at Bears Lodge in South Andros as well. So basically, the school is conducted in a couple different ways, and it's totally catered to whatever anybody wants to get out of it. But basically, we take the first day off, and we stay at the lodge, and we work on all the different casting skills that you'll need to work on with trajectory and line speed and getting the line to lay out low to the water, both while you're in the boat, while you're waiting, line maintenance issues, hook setting, fish fighting techniques, how to correctly handle a bonefish both in the boat and out of the boat for a photo, how to take the photo correctly without injuring the fish, how to take the hook out, you name it, the whole shebang. But a lot of focus on casting and understanding how the fundamentals of casting work. Because most people, even advanced casters, when I sit down with them and share, casting knowledge, a lot of times there's many things that they're not familiar with. And we talk about now listening and how it makes a difference on when they make their presentation, or how the wind is blowing or the boat is angled, really can make a difference. And we focus a lot on things that people don't think a lot about. Like if your ability to drop your back cast is in your head versus not, it opens up, it doubles your opportunity to catch fish right away. The guide doesn't have to turn the boat for you anymore. And you can take advantage of all shots from the bow of the boat, casting from any direction if you're comfortable laying out your back cast as your presentation cast. So now you can cast 360 degrees around the boat right away. If you combine that with high line speed and your ability to change trajectory, you can then shoot a lot of line in between each false cast, reducing the amount of false cast that you need, and get the line out that you need to load the rod quicker. And therefore, you can put the fly in the water quickly, creating a very valuable time and space to work with. And when you combine all that with a week's worth of practice, right after you've learned it, it immediately makes you an exceptionally better angler. Not only physically, but majorly mentally.
Well, let me ask you that. Like, what are some of you, like, I'm going to call them students or guests. Like, what are they coming in there not knowing how to double haul, or are they coming in there not knowing how to increase their line speed? And then at the end of the week, like, are they walking away like where they've got it down? Like, is that happening? Is that what's like take transparent?
Well, so everybody learns at different paces, but believe it or not, as we all know, learning the double haul is usually considered one of the most challenging aspects of casting and one of the biggest hurdles to get over.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. And usually more advanced anglers that have double haul, that are really good with comfortable with their double haul, are considered more advanced, right? So I've had guys that are really comfortable double hauling and that have actually caught a lot of bonefish before, but have said, "Hey man, I want to come to your sport." Well, great. You want to know what those guys learn? They learn all the little things that they never knew. Like, don't throw your fly in the water and then pick it up to make a cast. Don't let your fly touch the water at all until you present it to the fish in the water. Because guys would throw their fly in the water as they, if they're right-handed caster, they'd take their left line hand where they're holding the fly in the ready position, throw the fly out in the water to the left of the boat, and go to make the back cast with the wind in their face. Well, the wind would blow the fly right into their pant leg or the boat bumper or whatever, and they would miss the opportunity, right? Yeah. So explaining things on line maintenance, explaining things on trajectory on your cast, and being able to drop your back cast really quickly at 12 o'clock, even though you might think you should do it with your right-hand casting side at 12 o'clock. All these little things that make all the difference in the world and help you to be able to get the fly there quickly does nothing but add to the value on top of the fact that they can already double haul. So I can adjust in a split second to whatever every angler's level is and add value to them at an applicable rate that doesn't confuse them and allows them to apply different things each day. And I talk to everybody when they come back. So we do the school the first day. We do all the introduction to things. We even do some fly tying, and we do some leader building throughout the week. It's kind of a fun thing to do after dinner when everybody's kind of relaxed a little bit after dinner. We gather around the dining room table. We'll tie some leaders, and we'll talk about leaders and mono diameters and different knots and why this works and why that works better. And with this tapered line and that rod, da-da-da-da-da. And we also do flies, which I think is extremely important. You don't have to necessarily be a fly tyer, but you really should have a really good understanding of what the material is on the fly, how much of it is on the fly versus how big the hook is, how heavy the hook is, how much weight you're tying on the fly in comparison to how much material you have that's going to either work with or work against the amount of weight that you're throwing. So you can get the same type of diving action out of the bonefish fly with this type of pattern than you can with this one as well, a different one. So explaining flies is huge. swing. The leaders is huge, but they go fishing the next 4 or 5 days after the first day of the school. Then they're allowed then they're going to apply what they've learned the first day in real time, both waiting and on the boat. And I encourage everybody, when they get back at the end of the day, to ask me questions. If you're not asking me questions, you're not getting what you should be getting out of school. So ask me questions that you had today. So every day, I wanted to hear at least 2 things that people thought they might have additional questions on, or concerns, or whatever they had happened to them today that they thought they would like to ask me questions on. And we deal directly with things that they're concerned with or had experiences with that very day. And that is super, super valuable. I've been on hosted trips with other hosts, but it's not necessarily based on learning or teaching. It's just, let's go fishing and have a great time today. And that's great. But to combine the two, where you have a hosted trip with the ability to learn mega from someone that has the ability to not only teach it, but has the experience level as well, it's really hard to beat. Mm-hmm. So the value there is huge. So the problem that I have is that I'm married and I have a family, and it's hard to be away on all these trips as much as I do. But all the guys that come on the bonefish school trips, they want to come back again the next year, and again, and again, and again. So I have all the same guys that come on the schools right now, and it's hard to start new schools because then I'm adding more time away from the house and the family. So I've been trying to incorporate bringing my wife. So we have a week in February for Valentine's week where we do a couple school. Cool. So so that way that gives people the option to bring their wives with them or their significant others and come and go bone fishing together. And that way the girls can have a great time fishing together one day, and then the guys can fish together one day, and then of course they have time to fish with each other as well, the spouses and stuff. So it really works out great. And you throw Valentine's Day in there with a big fun cake at night, and it makes it for a great trip. And of course the women sometimes feel a little intimidated, but this being there with other women is huge. So they feel very, very comfortable learning and casting and being around other women that are doing it as well versus their spouse. So a lot of times I encourage the women to actually fish with each other on the very first day and allow them to gain experience, feel comfortable with the guides, the routine, everything together with another fellow woman. And then that allows them to be able to handle things a lot better when they get on the boat with their spouse and enjoy the day better. So it's all about catering to making sure you have the right people together on these trips so everybody gets along and has a great time. And then along with that, adding the value of the most incredible bone fishery there is with endless opportunities and forgiving fish. And then you add the instructor side of it. It's hard to beat the fishing situation that we've created. And that's why it's so popular.
Crazy. Bruce, you're just talking about it. I'm just picturing it in my mind. You're selling me on it. For what is it, for 21 coming up? Do you guys have opportunities open? If someone wanted to reach out, they could definitely reach out, and hopefully with the travel. What's that?
In fall of 21, right now we do.
Perfect, awesome.
All the schools are sold out.
Love it. Wow. Let's shift here. So you've done what, 30 years now? You've been in the fly fishing industry. You pretty much know everyone.
It's 92. We're getting almost to 30 here.
Okay. Well, let's just call it 30. 30 years, many people. You've designed fly lines. You got a full-time guiding thing. You got multiple bonefish schools. You're friends with so many like big name people and whatnot. What are some of the changes that you've seen the industry transform or take recently that are on the forefront? Something that you're just you're looking at and you're just like, there's obviously in that time, back in the early days, like just through evolution of gear and line and everything to the way that the industry is now and how we're marketing things in the industry.
Well, what I've noticed is that, of course, technology is coming in and on all different levels, from manufacturing products, better products, zippers that don't rust, bags that don't get wet, that all these things used to be. Better monofilament and leader building materials where you're they're able to create a softer coating, which allows for the knots to seat up tighter, which gives you a tighter connection, yet still offering a stiffer core to the mono, which allows the line to lay out straighter. The diameters and the strength of the leader material is getting huge. A lot of the companies are coming out with smaller and smaller diameters every year that with stronger and stronger pound test, which is very good. But also understanding leader systems, you want to make sure you understand what you're doing in your time. Leader materials like that. A lot of times I get my bone, like for example, my bonefish leaders. I'll taper down as far as the pound test and the diameter difference all the way down to the end, and I'll with a hard mono, and then I'll put at the end a fluorocarbon tippet or 2 sections of fluorocarbon in the end, depending what I'm doing, what the conditions are. And a lot of times, if not almost all the time, I am dropping down in pound test per section along with diameter. But when I get to the fluoro tippet, I actually drop down in equal increment again of diameter, but the pound test reading goes up. So like I'll have a 12-pound tippet, because tippet is typically clarified as the actual weakest section of your leader, not necessarily the end or the tip of the leader. So I'll have a 12-pound hard mono section with a diameter of 0.015 and connect it to a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader, tippet section, or at the very end, not tip section, but the end piece. And that becomes a 0.013 diameter, which is a smaller diameter than the 12-pound mono. So people get all mixed up in the pound test, because in saltwater, for years, we've generally talked pound test. So if I was on the boat with a buddy and my buddy said, "Hey man, I got some 60-pound here. Do you have any 50-pound?" Well, what he's really referring to, and we all know, is that he just wants something a little smaller in diameter, right? Mm-hmm. If it was 50-pound, 40-pound, 30-pound, 300-pound test, does it really matter? We're not putting anywhere near 30-pound test or 300 pounds worth of pressure on this leader. Like, the pound test at that level really doesn't make any difference.
Yeah,
what we're really referring to is downsizing. But here's the difference that I've noticed in the industry per your question. Over the years, I've noticed that diameters with different manufacturers are all over the place. Even with their own brand of monofilament, as they break down from pound tests, the diameters are significantly different between each one. They're not consistent, and that makes it challenging to build a leader if you're only going by the pound test. So, plus one company's 50-pound test could be a completely different diameter than someone else's 50-pound test. So I really have to get really technical when people ask me, how do you do your leaders? Do you do, 60, 50, 40, 30? I'm like, well, it depends on what manufacturer mono you got, and is it fluoro versus mono? And that, there's a lot of questions I have to end up asking now, which is actually good, but it makes it a little confusing too. So what we're trying to do is create a system where, at least I try to create a system where I give a recipe that explains both the diameter and the pound test and why the difference is between the two and how that helps to contain energy, along with that we work really hard to put in the system. We want to contain that energy and transfer it smoothly all the way to the end of the fly to get that sucker to lay out straight, because that's the main goal that we need to help with the most. So that's probably one of the biggest things I've seen is changes in the leader material and pound test, but also along with fly lines, man, it's really cool how we can change the coatings and the stiffnesses and the slicknesses of the coatings to not tangle as much in the severe heat. All this technology has been really helpful and huge, and being able to create a non-friction creating fly line that slides through the guide is really, really nice. A lot of people don't like the noisy part of textured fly lines, but man, does it work. Well, the less the fly line in those guides, when you're hauling on the major flex point, when you really get into this and you're hammering on that cast, You got 25-mile-an-hour wind in your face, and you got a nut jam on that line, super high line speed, and that rod is fully loaded and bent. At that very point right there, your line is being compressed and flattened against the guides of the rod.
Mm-hmm.
And the less that your line is touching those guides as you haul, helps you create that much more line speed, which is what you're trying to do. You need it to be successful.
You needed to get it out there.
With the new technology they're able to do it really, really helps the angler to be able to take advantage of the technology just in the fly line coatings alone. And the textured coating for sure. So those are probably some of the big things for sure.
What about like the advancement within the industry of like, say, like technology of like social media technology or anything like that? Have you seen a shift? Like I know back in '93 when you got into it and you wrote the essay and you went to the fly shop to work. There was no, Instagram, there was no Facebook, there was no technology then. So I'm sure that's a shift as well. I mean, 30 years in the industry, like. Now you see, take my page, for instance, right? Like a lot of fishing pictures, still water pictures, all that sort of stuff, right? Like, that's new. Do you feel that's opened up the industry to more players?
Sure, but are they worthy of it? So a lot of companies I've noticed are supporting influencers and people in the industry that are like 24 years old. They hardly have any experience. They've never written an article in their life. They've never done a personal presentation or taught anybody or anything at all. They just are very savvy with the computer and able to create big numbers with their accounts, social media accounts, and create exposure that way. And that's great. We need those people too. But a lot of times the industry manufacturers are getting caught up in that, and it's hard to put a value on how much social media is actually creating financial improvement for these manufacturers versus having guys that are very knowledgeable and that have been around the brink. So it's good to see that they're having a well-rounded approach to that, and hopefully these companies will start to create programs that will allow the influencers to work more directly with the head honcho, mega experienced iconic anglers that we have in the industry, and I foresee nothing but positive for all sides when companies start to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think having that, the contributors, the guys that do design line, the guys that do design leaders, paired or placed with, the influencers for sure. It's a win-win-win for everybody, right? Because then we're getting the right content out. For sure. Totally agree with that. So,
we were even talking earlier this morning before we got on the podcast, and you were saying you'd love to get a hold of some guys to do some more podcasts with you, and you have a really hard time getting a hold of them. You want to know why? Because they're out fishing. They're working it. Mm-hmm. They're jamming. They're getting it done. But some of these guys, you need time to sit around on the couch and make an Instagram post. How do they have time to do that?
Yeah.
And how could they bring to the table experience-wise what the guy that's really hard to get in contact with that maybe doesn't spend as much time on the social media. So putting all that together and hopefully having everything come together in one big happy world where we can all work together and create balance, it would be really, really awesome.
Well, that's what I said to you is like, those are the guys that I want. And that's why it's so freaking hard and I'm waiting for them. And, I've had to go to their manufacturer and said, hey, like, you need to reach out to these guys for me. You want them on the show, so let's get them there and stuff like that. Like it's crazy, but I recognize and respect the fact that they need to make a living. They're out there doing their thing. They're out there product testing the 21 stuff right now. Like that's what they're doing. That's why they're, that's why I want them. That's why the audience wants them. So definitely. And that's kind of the way it is now, right? For us to go forward here. So just to recognize that value and what's brought to the table, Bruce. So,
I hear you.
You got tons of stuff going on. I'm going to kind of cut it short here, but what's next for you, man?
That is a great question. And to be honest with you, I'll give a little hint, but unfortunately, the events of 2020, out of the COVID-19, has put a big damper and on my plans. But I'm in the middle of putting together something pretty big. At least I think it's big, where I'm going to take my schools, my hosted trips, my experience, and everything that I worked really hard for a long time, put it all together and offer anglers adventures of a lifetime. And there's certain key factors that is going to make this an unbelievable success and value to a lot of anglers. But basically, I love guiding more than anything. But one thing that is definitely getting a little challenging is guiding 152 straight days in the spring in the boiling hot sun, and it's getting tough. Like, I would love to. I crack a joke with my anglers all the time. It'd be really cool for like 10% of my time minimum to move 16 feet forward. That's my goal. So just to give you an idea, my skiff is 16 feet long. Like, I want to move from the back to the front. Like, I'd love to take a cast. Can I cast pretty, please? You know? And so, hey man, it looks like you need a drink. You want to sit down for a minute and take a bite of your sandwich here, and let me just I'll watch the bow for you here for a minute. So I every now and then I get a little thing to take a shot, right? That's great. But for the most part, a lot of times when I go on these hosted trips and on my schools, I get to actually fish with the angler on the boat with a guide, right? The guy, I'm not the guide. I am an angler on the boat. And when you get to an advanced level, or maybe not even advanced level, any level really, I've had one of the perks of the bonefish schools and the hosted trips that I have is that you might get the opportunity to go fishing with me for the day. Sometimes it's hard to do that when you have too many anglers on the trip per the number of days that you have to fish. So sometimes I can't fish with everybody. But for the most part, it's the opportunity to be able to go fishing with me. I've had the most resounding responses from that. When I have anglers watch me fish and watch me cast, most of the time they're like, "That's how you do it. Okay, now I'm putting everything together with what you've shown me and taught me, and now I can actually see it in real time." And what makes them feel even more comfortable is every now and then, I'll screw up too, right? I'll make a cast and I didn't see that fish over to the right, and I line them, and then they all swim away or whatever. And I'm like, dude, this is part of the game. This is what it's all about. Yeah, yeah. So with my plans is my goal is to expand on my hosted trip traveling around the world and offer an experience like no other when you combine my experience and the level of teaching ability and my exposure throughout the industry and everything I have. I'm able to create contacts and communicate with people and set up trips that are totally customized to what I want to do, and therefore create an unbelievable value to the angler that maybe nobody else might even have the opportunity to do because the trip doesn't even exist. So I'm putting stuff together like that. But of course, as you can see, it's very travel based. And the COVID stuff that came out this year just about shot that in the foot right now. So that's on pause. But as soon as things clear up, I'm ready to take a small percentage away from guiding throughout the year and do more hosted trips and some really cool trips that aren't even actually available right now. So that's what I got in the book.
Well, Bruce, if you ever have an extra seat, we would love to join you on those trips. That's for sure. We'll leave it at that. Bruce, before I let you go, if anyone wanted to reach out to you and learn more about your trips, your hosted trips, learn your leader system for permit, learn about your leader systems that you guys are doing for fly line leader, any technical questions, book a guiding trip with you guys, or just how talk to you, where could they find you at?
Well, for most part, I love talking on the phone. So if anytime you want to call me or send me an email or text me, I'm usually very communicative, especially if I have the time. And you can just check out my website at brucechard.com. My son BJ has been guiding with me now for the last 4 years, and he works with me on all my hosted trips and teaching and everything. So we got a great thing going there. So we have lots of ways to be able to accommodate. And there's a lot of information on the website. You can reach out to me via email, phone call, text, all from the information on the website. So feel free to check it out. And there's also some great leader videos that I've done with Hatch. Go to the Hatch Outdoors website and go into the Bonefish Tarpon Permit Leaders system there. And there's some really great videos there that have created a lot of traction in the leader world in the last couple of years. And I guarantee you'll enjoy watching it for sure.
Awesome. I love it, Bruce. I'm definitely going to make sure I put all those points and contact points within the show notes for the listeners. So, Bruce, I'm going to cut it short here. We've been talking for quite a bit. My mind is blown. I'm learning so much about bonefish and permit and the importance of having the proper leader line set up. And, man, I definitely want to hit you up on one of those schools if there's ever an opportunity. But till then, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. And listeners, I want to thank you guys as well.
Thanks for having me, Greg. See you guys out in the flats. Go get them.
No worries. Thank you. You've been listening to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast. If you like this podcast episode, please let us know. Leave a review and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening platform.